Welcome back to the App Maker for Jira tutorial series. In this video, we are going to be going over a capability in App Maker for Jira called conditions. Conditions are used to automatically control when certain actions should or shouldn't occur in the app. For example, you might only want to render a certain UI component if certain pieces of data in a data object or a data list meet certain criteria, or you might only want to execute a webhook transform if certain fields in the webhook payload are met or meet other criteria. Just to give you a quick heads up, the conditions do require you to write some extremely simple, you could call it code. It's not really code. It's more like, a math equation, but a very, very basic one, in order to tell the system when you want an action to occur or not. If you're not comfortable writing any code, you've never written code before, don't worry. We've made it really simple, and you don't really need to know how to write code to do this. We'll show you how it works. This is basically as simple as it can get. You don't need to have any prior experience writing code for this. You just need to know how to write. If you can write a math equation, like a very basic sort of math equation, you will be fine. That's all you need for this. For those of you who maybe are more comfortable with code and you do understand some code, it's worth you knowing that under the hood, we're using a very small subset of JavaScript to evaluate these conditions. So if you think about kinds of sort of conditional statements that you can do in JavaScript, most of those kinds of things are going to be supported here. Now, we will not be going over even 1/10 of the full extent. We're only going to be going over some very simple ones, like when a value does or doesn't equal something. But just know that basically the full set of JavaScript condition type statements are supported by our conditional system. All right. So conditions are written in a small subset of a coding language called JavaScript. And I'm going to jump across to our actual documentation here to show you an example here. So this is an example of condition you see here, the non-blurred section. And so conditions are made up of a standard kind of structure, usually made up of a simple comparison between two values with some kind of comparison, what we call operator in between. So this is a simple example of a condition where we're checking if the value of a field in a data object is equal to another value. In this case, we're saying, does the value of data objects.project.systemstatus.website equal the string online? Now, if it does, then the condition will be true. If it does not, then the condition will be false. It's important to note that so the double equals is how you say a condition is equal to something. If you want to say if something is not equal to it, you use an exclamation mark. So you would go exclamation mark equals, and we refer to this as like a bang. So it'd say bang equals online or not equals online. So this is the same condition here, but what we're doing is saying if the data objects.project.systemstatus.website does not equal online, then this condition will be true. Now, it starts to get it can get a little confusing when we say something like, if something does not equal something else, then the condition is true. So just try to stick with it. And what we're saying here basically is, show this UI component if the value is anything except this. So you can think of the bang equals as like an except operator. So this should show, this UI component should render in all scenarios except where this field equals online, for example. You can also write conditions that are comparisons to numbers. So if you say have a data object or a data list or something like that, or a field in Jira that holds a number, and you say only want to render a UI component if that number is above a certain value, or if you only want to execute a webhook transform if that number is below a certain value, you would say, all right, so data objects.project.systemstatus.webhook. Let's say this is a website response time. The right pointy bracket is more, left pointy bracket is less. So what we're saying here is, if this value, data objects.project.systemstatus.website response time, is over 1000 milliseconds, show the UI component. So an example of where you would use this is let's say you have a specific UI widget which you only show to your support agents if you know that your website is experiencing some slowness and the website response time is quite slow. Well, you would have a condition on that widget which says only show this widget if the most recently reported response time was over 1,000 milliseconds. And that way the widget will only show up if you're actually having slowness in your website rather than you having to receive, say, a separate event from your notification system every time. Because, for example, your let's say uptime monitoring system may not consider your website to be down if it's just going slow. So what you might be doing is you might be getting, every 5 minutes you're getting a webhook from your monitoring system, which is like this system is the website's online. But as part of that webhook, you might also get a response time number. And what you might want to do is have a widget which is like, well, the website's up, so I don't want to show the widget which says the website's down, but the response time was over 1,000 milliseconds. So I do want to show maybe like a little warning widget, which is like, hey, the website's up, but it's going slow. So conditions give you an enormous amount of flexibility to show certain things when certain values are at certain levels. So that way you don't need your monitoring system to send you a specific event, which is like system, website is slow equals true. You can just get to send you whatever the response time was, and then you can have this logic inside your, say, UI component to say, well, if that number is above 1,000, I want to render the UI component. If it's below 1,000, I don't. Like I said, this is more complicated than the previous steps. So this is probably something to go on to once you're a bit more comfortable with the system and you sort of learned how it works. But this is also an extremely powerful way of using the tool as well. So in terms of operators that you can use for numbers, this is the list of all the different operators you can do to compare numbers. So greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to or not equal to. Now, you can also have multiple conditions within the conditions list because it is a list. And that way you can specify multiple sets of things that need to be true in order for the UI component to render or the webhook transform to execute. So using this as an example, basically each condition is written as a string, and then multiple conditions are separated by a comma outside the double quotes. So this UI component, for example, has two conditions. So it says the data objects.project.system status.website needs to be online and the API needs to be offline. So you might have a special widget that you show if the website is showing as online, but the API is offline, and you would use this condition to tell the system, all right, only show this special widget if this is online, but this is offline. When you have multiple conditions in this list, this conditions list, separated by a comma, they are all additive. So all of them must be true in order for the, say, UI component to render or the webhook transform to execute. Now, there are situations, though, where you might want to have what we call OR logic. So if you think about it, whenever you're writing, say, conditions maybe in like Excel or something like that, quite often you want to have, there's either AND logic or there's OR logic. So the top level conditions are always AND logic. So it's like this and this must be true in order for the thing to execute. But you can also use OR logic if you want to, as well as you can implement AND logic within a condition. If you want to have, say, multiple different things within a single condition, almost like wrapping them in brackets if you're sort of like doing it traditionally in something like Excel. And the way you do that is by using the double ampersand or the double what we call pipe character. So the pipe character is the one above your enter or your return key, the vertical pipe, and the ampersand you should be familiar with. It's sort of like on your 7 key normally by holding shift. So the way you use these is within the string. So remember I said before that each of these are separate strings, so they have double quotes at the end separated by a comma. Within the actual condition statement, if you want to do an OR statement, you would do the first condition, written like that. You don't close the double quotes, and you would go the double pipe. So this is an OR operator. And then you would put the second statement afterwards. And then you could go a third or a fourth or a fifth, whatever you want. Go nuts. And what that then makes is this then becomes a single complex statement, which says, if this is true, or if this is true, then the entire statement is true. And then going back up to the top level, AppMaker needs all of the top level statements to be true in order to execute the action. But you can do your more flexible OR logic within a statement by saying, well, for this whole statement to be true, either this condition or this condition need to be true. So this gives you a bit more flexibility. You could also add AND statements in here and to allow you to do more complicated things. So you could do something like wrap these in brackets. You could say like add a bracket there and then go at the end of it, you go and another statement and then close that bracket. And then what we'll do is we'll sort of evaluate those two together and then make that a single comparison. And then you could do the other one. You experiment with it and understand how it works. And like I said, this is all just using JavaScript conditional syntax. There are links in our documentation to sort of like little playgrounds where you can just like test out different conditions and stuff like that. We're also looking to add a tool to the actual app in the future where you can sort of give it some context data and then just write some example conditions and then sort of test it and just see what it comes out as, so you can tell whether or not you are writing your conditions correctly. But they really are fairly simple. All you need to understand is this idea of the OR operator and the AND operator. And then basically this is just like what you would use when you're templating data. And then this is your comparison. Like, so what are you saying? Is it equal? Is it not equal to that? You can combine them in any way you want. So this is sort of a more complex example here. So there we're going, this example checks that the website status is either online or offline and that the AKI status is either online or offline. So basically this is checking to make sure that you don't have a blank or an indeterminate status for anything. So it has to be one of these two values. So the website has to be one of those two values and the API has to be one of these two values. And these are separate statements because they're separated by a comma. You can also check if a certain value is included in a list of other values as part of a condition. Again, this is a little bit more complicated, but it's a demonstration of how we're using basically JavaScript conditional statements to execute these conditions. So if you say, let's say you want to check data objects.project.system status.website, and there were 3 potential statuses that you consider to be valid for this. One way to do that would be doing it like this, where you go data objects.project.system status.website equals online, or data objects.project.system status.website equals offline, or then you go or. But as you can tell, that's going to get really long and really kind of cumbersome to work with. So ideally what you would want to do is you'd be like, well, is this value one of a list of other values? And just specify that list rather than having to write 3 entirely or 4 entire or 5 entire separate conditions. Where this gets particularly important is if you have maybe like 20 things that are valid, you don't want to be writing 20 different OR conditions here. So the way you do that is you use a list operator in the conditions. So you basically write all of the valid things in a list. So you go inside double quotes, square brackets, and then a list of values. So it can be online, offline, unknown. And then you place a dot immediately after the closing square bracket. So you close the list and you go dot includes. And then the value you want to compare against. So basically what you're saying here is, does this list include whatever is at this path? And if it's true, the condition will be true. If it's not, then the condition will be false. So what we're going to do now, really quickly, is we are going to show you a worked example. So we're going to go back to our webhook transform, and we're just going to create our system status widget again. Just for the sake of the example. But we are not going to be getting any information from a data object. We're just going to hard code this for now, just to show you. Actually, you know what? We will. No, we'll kick this because this will be really useful. So we're getting the values here from the this data object. And now I'm going to go up here. So we haven't got any conditions on this now. You don't have to include conditions on a UI update, a UI component. And if you don't, that's fine. We'll just ignore it. But if I'm going to add conditions, and conditions is always a list, even if it only has one item. So it's always got square brackets. And then what I'm going to say is, if only show this if data objects dot project dot system status equal dot group site equals online. Now, this is just for the sake of example. So I only want this UI component to render if the website is online. And the reason I might do this is because I might render a different widget if the website is offline. All right, so I'm going to save that UI component. Now, rather than going and making an API request and a bunch of other stuff using web transforms, I'm just going to create the data object directly. So I'm going to go data objects. I'm going to go new. I'm going to change the resource type to project. I need to set an action in here. I'm going to set the resource key. This is useful for you to see that you can just go and edit data object directly through the UI. You can delete them, you can edit them, you can create them, whatever you want to do. The title needs to be, it was like system status. And then the data object itself needed to have website. It needed to have API. And we want the website to be online because we want to show the widget. And we need this to be offline, just for the sake of example. Great. Save. Now we have our data object. So then if I go to project and we go to AMT and we go to my test issue. Now I'm going to show you a few things. So one, this is here. This works. So the UI widget was created. The website value is online, and the data this is being pulled through from the data object. We didn't hard code this into the widget. We're pulling this from the data object. Now I want to show you a few things. Starters, I'm going to close this. Your project and your test. I'm going to go up to there. I'm going to look at this. Notice that there's no widget here. It's not loading any widget in. That's because the condition did not pass. So you can already see how powerful this can be because you can use conditions. One of the simplest ways to use conditions is to only render widgets inside certain projects. So this is only going to that widget is only going to render when the value is there, and because this test project doesn't have that data object, the value is not there, and so the widget isn't rendering. So that's the first example of that widget not rendering. I'm going to close this. Go back to. When we go to apps, I'm going to go and change that data object now. Going to data objects, going to edit the data object, and I'm going to change this to offline. Save, cool, it's updated. I'm going to go back to use my AMT project. Now the AMT project, it was rendering before, and I'm going to do it there. And look, no custom apps available. And that is because the widget was told, hey, only render if the status of the website is online. We went to change the data object to offline, so that condition was no longer true, and now that's why the widget is not rendering on this view anymore. All right, so now you know how now you know how conditions work. Conditions are something that it's a really good idea just to play with. You need to just experiment, learn how they work, play with the syntax, learn how to create them and make them work, do what you want. But once you become comfortable with them, they're a bit like JQL. Once you become comfortable with them, they can be extremely, extremely powerful. It can give you a lot of flexibility in terms of the apps you create and how they do and don't work. In the next video, we're going to be going over sort of the last really big feature of AppMaker, which is called data lists. So data lists are the kind of like next step after data objects, and they allow you to store lists of data rather than just a single item of data. And they are what allow you to start sort of doing things like pulling multiple similar bits of data into your projects. So an example is you might say in a Jira project have a list of pull requests from GitHub, or you might want to have a list of deals from your CRM showing in Jira Service Management. You might want to have on a Jira Service Management ticket, use the customer who is attached to the Jira Service Management ticket and show a list of all of the deals that that customer has open from the CRM, but show them inside Jira Service Management. And so you're sort of like bridging Jira Service Management and your CRM tool together. They're the kinds of things that you can do with data lists that are very, very powerful. We'll be going over those in the next video.